Hey students, welcome to today's lecture on storytelling, structure, and strategy. These are some of the most important concepts we can cover because storytelling doesn't just involve business scenarios where you're giving a TED talk or something. No, storytelling is interwoven into our sociological, societal fabric. It's what we use at the dinner table with our families to connect and make each other laugh. It's how we build stronger relationships with friends or people we're dating. It is ultimately how you convince an audience to believe in the core values of your message. It's a method of understanding. It's what the best educators use to inform and instruct others. And so it really is a pivotal skill to be adding to your toolkit when it comes to career strategy. So let's dive in to the slides, look through some of this content, and we'll cover the assignment that's due at the end of next week. And hopefully you'll gain some pretty insightful, applicable action items that you can do to improve your skill of storytelling. So let's head over to the slides. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the type of storytelling that we're going to prioritize is the strategic and structured kind of storytelling. And the reason why we want to do this is because sometimes when we tell stories, we're getting long-winded, we're ranting or rambling, or maybe we're including details that just aren't quite important. And if in an elevator pitch scenario or a networking scenario, or even an interview where you only have about 2 to 3 minutes to answer a question, you want to make sure that your stories are concise, value-rich, structured, and strategic. So we're going to start there. The most important thing is to identify an audience objective. This right here. Who is your audience going to be? Who is going to be, or what do you want that individual or group of people to do as a result of your story? And if you take it back a little bit further, we'll say an interview. What's the whole point of an interview? You want to get hired. So your stories should obviously have an objective surrounding that overarching objective. So if I want to tell a story in an interview, it better be related to what I believe the interviewers are going to care about in order for me to get hired. Now that might seem like a nuanced, subtle, small thing, but it can have a big impact on how you tell a story. And we'll go over some examples here in a bit, and you'll understand and see what I'm talking about there. So we need to start with that. What do I want the audience to feel, to think, or to do as a result of my story? So if I am creating a bank of stories, which 10 out of 10 recommend you doing, it's great to have 10, 15, 20 stories banked, mapped out, outlined with this structure I'm about to show you throughout your career, so you can pull them out at any moment to connect with somebody, to potentially open a door, an opportunity, but ultimately to build relationships with other people. That's the whole idea of storytelling. So there we have our audience objective. And we've identified it, and we say, yeah, this is what I want the audience to think, feel, or do as a result of my story. And then on the other side, we need that story to be relevant and from our own personal experience. We don't want to be just making up fictitious stories. I mean, that could be fun, but we're not in a storytelling competition. We are trying to land that future career opportunity that will carry us forward for the rest of our lives. Or if I'm starting a business and I'm trying to get investors, I need stories to really hit home the value of my startup and my team and what have you. So we need these stories to be relevant, and they need to be something that you personally have experienced or at least have a close connection to. When you combine those two things with your brand, we've talked about branding statements, we've talked about strengths and skills up until this point. So when you combine those three things together, you have a branded strategic story that further enhances your reputation, builds a relationship, increases trust, and connects to your audience, and ultimately it conveys value and ideally accomplishes your audience objective. That's what we want to do. So the structure that I'm going to show you today is setting, characters, situation, and outcome. Okay? Every story should have those 4 basic components in it. So let's break down each one of those quickly. Setting is a time and a place. A story needs to have a contextual time and a contextual place. 3 years ago, 6 months ago, earlier today, when I was 12. Most stories start with a time to give a frame of reference to your audience. Next is a location, a place. I was in London. I was in my backyard. I was at UVU, whatever it might be. Usually the first sentence of any story is the time and place, the setting. Think about it with media as well. Whenever a TV show starts, usually there's this panning shot of a landscape or of a building or of somebody in a car or whatever it might be, establishing both the time and place. We need to do that as well in our stories, usually in just one sentence or two, depending on how important that context is to the story. So that's setting. Next is characters. And it's who's involved. But we don't really need a supporting cast, especially in these condensed stories that we only want to be 30 seconds to 2 minutes tops. We really only want the relevant main characters, so to speak. So if I was on a team of 8 people, I'm only going to reference myself and maybe one other person in that story as it pertains to the purpose of the story. So for example, if I'm going to tell a story about some conflict I had with another team member, or maybe I'm going to tell a story about how I helped a team member who was struggling, and me being a part of a bigger team is important to the context, I'm not going to go through everybody, right? I'm not going to say, oh yeah, Sally, Jim, Charles, and Barry, and all these people. No. I'm just going to focus on, I was on a team of 8, and I had this one particular team member, let's say his name is Johnny. And that's all I'm going to say as far as characters, because as long as Johnny and I are the only relevant or pertinent characters, those are the only people I'm going to introduce. This is where a lot of people do get caught up, and they do add a little bit too much detail as they try and introduce all these characters that aren't really relevant. So let's not do that. Only the key characters, only main characters. Don't really need supporting casts in these condensed stories. Next is the situation. So we've done setting, we've done character. What's the situation? And as you can see here on the slide, what was the goal? What was the objective? What was the thing that the characters were doing, in essence? What were they trying to do? Or what were they experiencing or feeling or thinking? And then every good story has conflict. Every good story has a problem, a challenge, an obstacle that needs to be overcome. And we need to introduce that in our story. So we say time, place, who's involved, and then we introduce. So my team member was underperforming. They were Johnny, he was really struggling with this new software that was getting rolled out. It wasn't intuitive to him. He didn't get the training he wanted or needed. And our team was suffering because of that one role he had. So I've introduced the goal, which is a high-performing team. We obviously want to get our job done. And the obstacle was Johnny is struggling with this software, this program that was supposed to help him do his job. That's the obstacle, okay? The last thing, the fourth one, is outcome. And this is, how does the problem get resolved? How does Johnny overcome that? And so I say to Johnny, hey, Johnny, or I should say, when I'm telling my story, I introduce that Johnny is struggling with the software. So after a team meeting, I approach Johnny. I say, hey, Johnny, I noticed that it seems like you're struggling with this software. Well, how are you feeling about it? Oh man, it's so hard. It's taking so much time. I think I'm spending 4 hours reviewing the training materials, and I'm not getting what I need. And he's just really, really struggling with it. And so I scheduled a time to teach him and mentor him one-on-one for 2 hours every week until he felt he got up to speed. And that's how I helped him resolve it. So that was the plan. That was sort of the resolution. And then the actual resolution is, after we did this for a few months, Johnny got up to speed, and he actually became one of our top performers. And our team performed better than we ever had. We increased our sales by 40%, and we did it in less time. And that is the takeaway. So the resolution is what transacted, what was the events that transpired, but the takeaway, that is what matters most. We care most about the takeaway. This is the moral of the story. This is the value you're handing your audience after you tell a story. Because again, you could tell a story with lots of characters and complexity and even in a short time, and maybe your audience isn't quite sure what that takeaway is. So we need to make sure that we're handing them that takeaway. And here's the easy part. Remember how we identified the audience objective in the beginning, what we want the audience to think, feel, or do as a result of our story? Well, the takeaway is derived directly from that audience objective. So in this case, I'm in an interview. I'm trying to demonstrate how I'm willing to go the extra mile, to be a team player, and to do things to sacrifice for the greater good, showing loyalty and all those different things. And so my final takeaway sentence would probably be something along those lines. After helping Johnny and our team succeeding to such a greater degree, I found just how valuable it is to spend that extra time to help everyone succeed together. And as they say, rising tides lift all ships. That's the takeaway. That's the punch. That's the heart piercer of every good story. It's the value delivered. So this is the most important part, the takeaway. Everything should lead to the takeaway, the value delivered. Okay, so let's just review real quick. Setting, time and place. Pretty simple. Characters, only relevant ones, pertinent to the story. What was the story characters trying to do? What were they thinking or feeling? And what was the conflict? What made it difficult? How was that difficulty resolved? And what's the final takeaway? What do you want the audience to feel, think, or do as a result of the story? So this is where that strategy meets the structure. That's where the branding, the audience objective, and the guts of the story all come together to help you achieve what you're ultimately wanting to do. So let's practice. Let's do a little analysis. Okay? Now, I hate reading from the slides, but some of you like to listen while reading, and if you just want to listen to me tell this story, that's great. If you don't, you can just read this and skip to where we analyze it. But my question for you is this story a strategic, structured story? Does this have the structure criteria we discussed? Does it have a setting, time, and place? Does it have characters? Does it have a goal and objective and a resolution and a takeaway? Let's read together. Are your teeth stained or yellow? Are you embarrassed to smile at parties or in pictures or videos, especially next to your friends with those movie star smiles? Have you tried teeth whitening systems but given up after a few days because they made your teeth too sensitive? If so, Ultra White is right for you. It's the revolutionary new teeth whitening system designed by Hollywood dentists to give you star quality whiteness without all the pain and discomfort. Ultra White includes a two-step process that alternates applications between a high-impact whitening paste and a desensitization gel. The result? Sparkling white teeth without any discomfort that would keep you from showing off your new Hollywood smile. Okay? Pretty good sales pitch. If you were like me and you read this, you probably thought this was an infomercial or some sort of commercial, right? And commercials and advertisements and marketing are often loaded with stories. So is this a structured one? What is the setting? What's the time and place? The time can be, we could infer that it's right now, like currently, like you are experiencing this. The place, wherever you are, or when you are in a place where your teeth are the object of focus. Who are the characters? Hollywood dentists? Kind of? You, the subject is you, so you're a character, I guess. Yeah. And then what's the objective or goal? White teeth, probably. The conflict is they aren't white, and the goal is you want them white. And then the resolution is they become sparkling white. Anyway, you get the gist. This isn't a structured, strategized story. This is a problem-solution persuasive pitch. It is a sales message. And what this needs to be better, to be a more effective sales pitch, is to include a story. Because this is not one. And if you paired this pitch with a story, it would actually be a lot more effective. Imagine a scene where it's a restaurant. That's the place. The time you can infer from the decor and the attire. It's probably 2023, where, whatever this decade is or what have you. And it pans forward and you see two people, a man and a woman, at a table, and it appears that they're on a date. So now we have our characters. We have a man and a woman. The goal is to have a good date. And you can just infer all of this just from this one establishing shot. Then the woman introduces herself. Hi, my name's Sarah. Tell me about yourself. And then the man opens up his opens his mouth and smiles and says, hi, my name is, and it goes, and it zooms in on the woman's face. Her eyes grow big, and then it zooms in on the man's teeth, and they're yellow and black, and maybe there's a worm crawling. Okay, that's really gross, but you get the idea. The dun dun dun, and it tells this very dramatic story of these yellow teeth and how distracting it is on this date. You don't want that. You want a Hollywood smile. Insert this pitch. So the infomercial has all of these images accompanying this story, and then at the very end, it shows the same guy on a date, and it's with a different girl, or maybe it's the same girl, different guy, who sits down, starts telling his story, has pearly white teeth, and then she looks at the camera and says, I'm so glad he used ultra white, or something like that. There's a resolution, the person used ultra white, and sales pitch complete. You as the audience will then think of that story. I don't want to go on a date and be horrified at the teeth, or I don't want to be the person horrifying other people, probably more likely than not. So I know this is kind of a weird example, but you get the idea. The story complements, augments, enhances, and really hits home the value add of the sales proposition. So let's go to another example. A couple of years ago, Dave Neild, the network service leader at the University of Leeds in England, realized he had a problem. He was getting cease and desist orders and copyright violation notices from all over the world due to students on campus using file sharing services like BitTorrent. In addition, many of the students were showing up in his office with computers infected by viruses, which took his staff up to an hour each time to clean up. Dave agreed to do a test with a Hewlett-Packard Tipping Point network security device to see if that could help. And when the test was over, he told us, as soon as we installed Tipping Point, we instantly stopped receiving copyright notices. That protected our students from getting threatened by lawyers, and it protected the reputation of the university. They also got about 30% of their lost bandwidth back from the reduction in file sharing. So let's analyze. What was the setting? Pretty clear. University of Leeds in England. That's the place. Time. A couple of years ago. Well established. Characters. Dave Neild, network service leader. We have students as main characters. And you can make the argument that Hewlett-Packard is a character. Okay? What's the situation? The goal is to have students be successful at a university. To not have problems, so focus on education and not some of these other things. Problem, you can't do that if you're getting cease and desist orders, copyright infringements, and students are getting viruses on their computer. That's a big problem. How is it resolved? Well, Dave agreed to do a test with Hewlett-Packard Tipping Point network security device. And what happened? We were able to protect students, the university's reputation was preserved, and they also got 30% of their bandwidth back that they could use for other internet-related services. That is definitely the situation, outcome, resolution. But there is one thing this story is missing. The takeaway. What would you have the takeaway be? If this is your story that you are telling, what would you have the takeaway be? And your first thought could be, well, who am I telling this to? In what context am I telling this to? And that's a great thought. It's a great thought because if you're in an interview, you might want to highlight, and you're Dave Neild and you're in an interview, you're going to highlight how, hey, I am a futuristic, tech-forward individual who knows how to protect companies from malware and viruses and all these different things. I can protect your company. That's the takeaway. Or maybe you're Hewlett-Packard and you say, my friend Dave, he was the one who struggled with this, and I can protect you and your company. That's the takeaway, is that this product can protect your company or your whatever it might be. Or maybe you're a hacker and you're telling the story because you're trying to tell your fellow hackers, we got had by Hewlett-Packard Tipping Point. How are we going to work around this and continue to infect computers with viruses? So again, that audience objective is so important. Understanding the context of who you are delivering this message to and what you want them to think, feel, or do as a result of your story will drive your final statement, your takeaway, your call to action, however you want to describe it. And that's the most critical part. An amazing story needs a great takeaway. Again, in this context, hopefully it's an interview and you convey the value of what you can do for their company in that story. I have another one for you here about this adorable pig. Okay? Not my story. This is the story of another business professional, and I'm going to read it as if I were him. Okay? Last year, my wife Lisa and I went to an art fair in Cincinnati. She was looking for a picture for our son's bathroom at home. At one point, we found ourselves in the booth of an underwater photographer named Chris Gugg. As she was looking through his work, my wife got attached to a picture that to me looked about as out of place as a pig in the ocean. And that's because it was literally a picture of a pig in the ocean. A cute little baby piglet, snout covered with sand, dog paddling its way straight into the camera lens. Now, when I finally got a chance, I asked Chris what on earth that pig was doing in the ocean. And that's when the magic started. He explained that that picture was taken in the Caribbean, just off the beach of an uninhabited island, officially named Big Major Cay. He told us that years ago, a local entrepreneur brought a drove of pigs to the island to raise for bacon. Then he said, "But as you can see in the picture, there's not much more than cactus on the island for them to eat. And pigs don't much like cactus." So they weren't doing very well. Now, fortunately, a restaurant owner on a nearby island started bringing his kitchen refuse by boat over to Big Major Cay every night and dumping it a few dozen yards offshore. Eventually, the pigs got hungry enough to venture out into the water to get the food. Well, after enough time, all the pigs on the island learned to swim. In fact, nobody even calls it Big Major Cay anymore. Now, everyone just calls it Pig Island. At that moment, I slapped my credit card down on the table and said, "I'll take it." Good story. Good story. It has all of the 4 criteria of the structure. It has a setting, has this Big Major Cay Island, time a few years ago. Characters, pig, entrepreneur. The goal, raise pigs for bacon. Obstacle, lack of food. Not enough food for the pigs to eat, they're struggling. Resolution, restaurant owner dumps food into the ocean. Pigs learn to swim. And now this very unique ecological phenomenon occurs, and this island is now called Pig Island. But again, what's the takeaway? This is a good story. It's interesting. The guy bought the... So we've kind of got some storyception going on. Storyception going on. It's a story about a story. And that would be my big takeaway. Is that now in the story, the man who purchased the art was uncertain about whether he wanted to have a picture of a pig in his bathroom. But once he understood the story, he wanted it immediately. And that's the takeaway. Stories enhance the value of whatever it is attached to it. And there's even a study done on this. Check this out, okay? In July 2009, journalists Rob Walker and Josh Glenn conducted an experiment. They purchased 100 ordinary items from thrift stores and garage sales. Then, volunteers wrote short fictional stories about the items. Walker and Glenn then posted each item for sale on eBay with the fictional stories written about them. Within 5 months, all of the items sold. They originally paid $128 for the items. But can you guess how much they resold them with these attached fictional stories? So again, we have 100 items. That means the Average cost was $1.28 for this random junk, so to speak. Do you think they doubled their money? Tripled? 10x'd their money just by adding some fictional stories? Check this out. The resale paid on eBay totaled $3,612. That is a $2,800 increase in value. I'm realizing that my head's probably blocking it here. There we go. I'll buddy up with my guy right here. Crazy. 3,612. Guys, that's 2,800. That's a 28x on investment just by attaching stories to products. So how valuable can it be for you? When you are trying to sell your skills and strengths in an interview, or you're trying to sell a product, or you're trying to convince investors to invest in your company, whatever it might be, how much more valuable is it to enhance your message with a story? Well, the data shows 28 times more beneficial. I'm going to move on back over here. Okay. Let's move on over to ChatGPT here. Okay? Use AI to help you. AI is an amazing tool that you can use to help you create stories, because not all of us feel like we're great storytellers. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick right now. Okay, so here I have ChatGPT up, and ChatGPT is a great storyteller, can be pretty good at creating a structure. And check this out. So I'm just going to read what I put in here, and you can replicate this. I'm a marketer who wants to tell a story about my work experience for an upcoming interview. The setting is a call center I worked at 2 years ago. I had a customer call in furious about the service she had received. I didn't know how to help her, and she was screaming so loud I couldn't even think of a way to help her. I took a deep breath, asked if I could put her on a brief hold to look at some solutions. I reached out to some other team members for help. They gave me some really great ideas. I got back on the call and listened with understanding and empathy. I offered some solutions that the customer wasn't very happy with, but because they felt heard and understood, they calmed down and were easier to work with. I later received some feedback from my manager, who said the customer emailed them to thank them for how I handled the situation. The takeaways are I reached out for help when I needed it, I kept my cool, and helped win over a customer through listening and emotional intelligence. Please write this story in a concise way that I can share it in around 60 seconds. So this story that I wrote in here, it's got run-on sentences, it's kind of fragmented, it's not very smooth, and so I want ChatGPT to basically help me rewrite this story in a strategic, structured way. So check this out. At a call center, this is what ChatGPT put out. Okay, at a call center I worked at, I once had a customer who was incredibly upset, screaming so loudly I was momentarily at a loss. That's a little weird. I'd probably reword that for myself, but you could probably say something. And this is what's great about ChatGPT. It can do like 80-90% of the work for you, and then you just, add your own personality, your own flavor, and authenticity to it. Taking a moment, I placed her on a brief hold and sought guidance from my colleagues. They provided invaluable suggestions. When I resumed the call, I listened intently with empathy. While the solutions I proposed weren't her ideal fix, she felt heard and appreciated. To my surprise, she later reached out to my manager to express gratitude for how I managed the situation. The experience taught me the importance of seeking help, maintaining composure, and the power of truly listening with emotional intelligence. Oh, good luck with your interview. That's so kind. Thank you, ChatGPT. So you get the idea. Okay, ChatGPT can help you write a lot of these stories when you're stuck, or when you aren't sure how to word it, or if it's feeling too clunky, and those types of things. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next section. So these are some categories. I guess I'll shrink myself here so you can see the whole thing. These are some categories that you should have a bank of stories locked and loaded and ready for this, okay? The most important stories you have in your bank are ones that you can use for strategic situations like networking, interviewing, elevator pitch, etc. So, for example, you might straight up be asked in an interview, tell us about a time that you worked together as a team. Tell us a time when you experienced conflict with someone. Tell us a time when you failed, etc. Okay? So this week, there is an assignment where you are going to execute the structure and the strategy. Okay, here it is. So you're going to choose 3 of the following categories that I just showed you. And you're going to create a story based on your own personal experience from those categories, okay? What you need to make sure to do is you can tell that story in about 60 seconds. That's the goal. Can you keep it concise? Can you have the settings, the characters, the situation, the outcome, the takeaway in about 60 seconds? That's what you're shooting for. And then once you have your bank of about, again, for the assignment, it's only 3, but you should have 10, 15, 20 of these ready to rock and roll at any given moment, okay? So this will help you. And then as you move on in your career, you can have a document or something, a Google Doc or whatever you like to use, where you're storing some of these stories and creating an amazing bank for all of these different circumstances you might find yourself in. Okay, so you're going to create 3 stories. You're going to follow the SCSO structure, time and place, key players, goal, obstacles, conflict, how it was resolved, and takeaways. And then you're going to record yourself telling one of the stories. It cannot be written word for word. It has to be extemporaneous is what it's called. It's where you have the gist of it in your mind and you tell the story authentically and genuinely. Reading it is called manuscript. We don't want to do that. And you can do memorize. That's okay. But it's better to be able to share that story loosely and off the tip of your tongue, so to speak. So that's what I want you to do. And then I would like you to submit all 3 stories that you write in a Word document or in the text field submission. And this will be due not this week, but the following week. All right. Good luck. Have fun. Let me know how it goes. I can't wait to hear some of your stories. And now remember, I want you to focus on the audience objective. And in this class, we're working on that first position, that first job that we want once we graduate. Or maybe it's a startup, or maybe it's a product or a service that you're already working with that you want to be better at storytelling with, whatever it might be. Tailor it to you. Again, of those categories, you don't have to choose from those categories. If you can create a story that you know you're going to use with a different category, that's fine. I'm totally okay with that. That list of 6 to 7 categories, that's just more of something to get your brain, the wheels turning in your brain, and some very common stories that you'll run into. But make this your own. This is an invaluable skill that will benefit you throughout the rest of your life. And having that structure, having that strategy, and that audience objective linked to that key takeaway is massive. 28 times enhanced value if you want to quantify it. So make the most out of this assignment.